Cha-cha.
One party that just has to turn out right.
Well, the purpose of a party is to have fun together. And a successful party needs planning and...
I'm going with you now because I had righteous indignation, and now I have semi-righteous indignation.
I'm really good at taking the wind out of people's semi-righteous indignation sails. And,
you see, sales, I was going to say, have you ever considered a career in sales?
Sales.
Or sales, whichever, you know. Dave Hamilton is here with us, everybody. Dave Hamilton wrapping up the week. You know what? I've given you a chance to say everything before, as far as you want to tell them about this, you want to tell them about that. But since I made the sales joke, Backbeat Media, they handle sales for Mac OS X. And I don't think it is overstating it to say, had they not been doing that for the past several years, we might not be looking at a Mac OS X now. So there you go. If you're looking for somebody, call Dave and whatever. Is that okay to say? Are you fine with that?
That's great to say. Yeah, absolutely.
Are you cool if I sell your sales thing?
I love that you sell my sales thing.
Well, there you go.
I mean, we help each other. It's a wonderful partnership that we've had for a very long time, and
I know, right?
Thankful for it. Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet. Me too. So there we go. And enough of this because it's time for other people. A few weeks ago, well, golly, no, I guess it's been a few months now. I was looking back. I'm kind of surprised to see how many dinner parties we've had. For quite a while, of course, we were doing the album side thing. And then we went to a Wheel of Stuff. And Wheel of Stuff stuck around for quite a while. And it will be back. In fact, I think it's going to be back relatively soon because soon I'm going to have guests back on. And you can't say, well, give me 3 more people that you would have to dinner. But right now, while it's still new to you, we're doing dinner party. And for people who don't know what that is, it's basically the thing where it's like, you know, you can invite 3 people to dinner. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what time frame. Doesn't matter whether you speak the language. You just get to construct the dinner party of your dreams. 3 people, got about 2.5 hours to spend with them, to talk with them. I'm curious, Dave Hamilton, who is the first guest at your dinner party?
I thought I want Neil Peart at my dinner party.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know, but I knew because, you know, I know you. So go ahead.
Right. You know me. Yeah. I've been a Rush fan all my life. I've been a fan of not only Neil Peart's lyrics, but his books. And he was a very well-spoken person when you could get him to speak, which in private circles was all the time. He was not a very public figure in terms of his personality. Of course, his drumming sort of brought him to that. But very educated guy, very thoughtful guy. I would love to see him engage in conversation. So he would be the first one. My whole thing with this dinner party is I want to be outclassed in terms of expert conversationalists, right? Like I almost want to be a spectator there, but I like that they might let me get a word in edgewise every now and again, like maybe just to seed the conversation and let it go.
That's really interesting. So it's not that you have particular questions you would want to ask or a particular time you want to reminisce about. You want to put him with 2 other people at the table and see what they make.
Well, him as one of them. The second one came to me almost at exactly the same time. Like these 2 people really were at the top of the list together. And the second one was John Perry Barlow. I was never am not a huge Grateful Dead fan. Mm-hmm. John Perry Barlow was an interesting guy, to put it mildly. He called himself the junior lyricist for the Grateful Dead. He wrote a bunch of the songs that Bob Weir sang after Bob Weir and Robert Hunter, who was we'll call senior lyricist for the Grateful Dead, sort of had a bit of a falling out because Bobby was changing some of his lyrics, I suppose. But John Barlow wrote songs like Estimated Prophet and Helena Bucket and Cassidy and things like that. I met John in the green room, which is backstage. That's what we musicians call backstage. After a Cirque du Mac, which was the party that we used to throw where the Macworld All-Star Band would play at Macworld Expo.
Yeah.
And I went up to the green room. A friend of mine introduced me to actually 2 gentlemen named John. for whatever reason, he highlighted who one of them was, and I sort of knew it was John Gilmore, early employee of Sun, retired financially, probably did just fine because of his, early employee at Sun kind of thing. Co-founder of the EFF, on the board of MAPS and MPP and all sorts of other great organizations, an activist, if you will. And he is a great guy and remains a friend. And then there was this other guy, John, there. Great. And I wound up sitting on the couch between the two of them for like 2 hours and had this super in-depth conversation with the two of them, but mostly the other John. Like Gilmore went off and did other things.
Right.
And the next day, the friend that introduced us came up to me and he's like, wow, you and Barlow really hit it off last night. And I'm like, who? And he's like, Barlow. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. He's like, you were on the couch with him for like 2 hours. I'm like, oh, John? He's like, yeah, John Perry Barlow. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense now. Right? But it was fantastic having this conversation with him, not knowing, any of his celebrity, if you will, because it just allowed for this very sort of organic conversation to happen. He's a very intense guy, amazing conversationalist. And so I would be surprised, but not terribly surprised. I would be amused if you told me that he and Neil Peart had met and had conversations. They sort of lived in different circles together at the same time. And so I would love to see the two of them engage in conversation. So the third person, though, is one that I'm really sort of torn on. For our market, I, of course, should say Steve Jobs, right?
Yeah.
And that might be interesting.
Yeah.
Obviously, also a very thoughtful guy.
Can I really quickly? Can I say I think you're either the second or third person who has played this game who has said, I know I should say Steve Jobs, but
yeah, but I think that would be an interesting conversation. I did meet Steve Jobs. I talked to him very briefly. We shared a couple of emails over the years, but I certainly wouldn't say that I knew him. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I almost would. I'm trying to think of who I really would want to throw into that conversation. It might be Giles Martin, to be perfectly honest. He has a very interesting perspective on the world. He is someone I've gotten to know over the years. He's the son of George Martin, producer of the Beatles.
Okay.
Giles manages the Beatles catalog now. He's also the sound experience designer at Sonos, and he's done many other things in his career. But he's got an interesting view on that part of the world. So he might be an interesting person to sort of have there. I don't know. Jimi Hendrix came to mind as guest number 3. Mm-hmm. He died so young, though, that like any wisdom that he might have been able to accumulate and therefore communicate, we don't really know what that would have been.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't 30. He was one of the 27 Club, right? So,
right.
But I think Hendrix, if we could let him, age and grow a little first, would be a great person to have at that table. Yeah. So, and earlier this week when we were talking and at the very beginning, I mentioned Sammy Hagar. He would be an interesting person to have at that table, but it might change the conversation and dilute it a little bit. So, Sammy, I think you're probably not going to make the list.
All right. So wait, who is our third then? Is it Giles Martin or is it somebody else?
I don't know. I'm going to say Hendrix. I'll say Hendrix. I'll throw Hendrix.
Okay. You surprised me.
Yeah.
Hendrix would be interesting, I would think, and you would know more about him than I do because I know almost nothing. I know the hits and a couple of things. And I did go to that tour a few years ago that Living Colour and Susan Tedeschi and a bunch of other people did a tour of doing some of Hendrix's songs. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. I almost went to that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Chris Layton was the drummer on that tour, I think. So
yeah, it was really good and really interesting.
I'm going to change my answer. Hendrix just got uninvited. I'm going to put Zappa at the table.
Oh, well, okay, that makes sense. Just tell me why, though. It makes sense to me, but tell me why.
Well, we had the benefit of Frank having lived far longer than Hendrix, and right. he became. We got to see more of his wisdom, And so I think putting Barlow and Peart and Zappa at the table to entertain me while I eat my meal would be outstanding. And occasionally they might acknowledge that I was there, but that's okay. Either way, I'm good. I don't really have anything, I don't need to tell them the story of Dave, for sure. If they wind up on a topic that I might know something about, I'll chime in for sure. But otherwise I would, Zappa's the right one. Yeah. This has been a moving target all week for me. I have not. Zappa only came to mind 30 seconds ago, and it's absolutely the right decision. I'm going to stand with it. Steve doesn't get a seat at the table.